where those influenced by Jesus get stuck. Shame on me, though I'm doing my best, as Jesus knows. I thankfully had the scales of my eyes fall this last week regarding one aspect of Christianity and others that are influenced by the man Jesus. This is an extension, I suppose, of a post the other day about the seeming miracle of Jesus healing. Those who are alone, which is nearly all of us in complex societies, being truly alone, without humans around us that truly care about us for ourselves, the empathic listeners, the true family members, those without those of us without those, almost all of us are. That is the crippling condition for the human soul. That is most essentially responsible for the crucifixion of our souls in these complex societies at the earliest of ages now, 3, 4, 5 years of old, so early that as adults, almost all of us are unable to reconnect with, revitalize that. I've been blind to the fact, and am now less so, that Christianity and the horribly inadequate understanding of Jesus, the abuse of Jesus, still has the effect of causing individuals to no longer be alone, even though Jesus is not physically there with them. He's there in a story and then becomes someone in their imagination that in more cases than I was realizing is the family member that cares, the family member that listens, the family member that wants to help unconditionally. And that sets up some form of what psychology calls the empathic listener. That being in that way causes the individual, the soul of the individual, to realize it is no longer alone and that it has an ally in assistance to grow. Just being that empathic listener. And for some people, Jesus, in their imagination, serves that role well and somewhat perfectly, because of course that Jesus isn't there to then correct and advise and all the things that violate that empathic listening relationship. But that's where it stops. That is, no honest, thorough, broad, comprehensive reading of Jesus in Matthew, Mark, and Luke can conclude that Jesus' aim is to revitalize the soul, and there it stops. Jesus' aim was to raise people to the role of soldier alongside him, trauma team alongside him, rescuing other souls, finding the lost sheep. and rehabilitating the lost sheep, bringing them one by one, starting with the smallest of numbers, back into the fold that we were all born into, submitting to our soul, being children of God. The way Christianity has deliberately and by accident distorted Jesus into not a liberator from the head and flesh, but a crucifier of the soul, a liberator from the head and flesh of the soul to a crucifier of the soul, correction. Turns Jesus into a hospice provider. The soul just barely alive enough to keep we captives of the head and flesh, passive captives of the head and flesh, rather than liberating our soul to be fully in charge of us. The alive soul does what every healthy cell in your body and mind does. It serves every moment of its being. White blood cells don't serve when they feel like it. There's no such thing as feeling like it. They are what they are. They do what they were designed to be. We were not designed to be creatures of the head and the flesh, but our cultures need us to be that. They need our souls at best on life support so that we can be manipulated and controlled by our head and our flesh, and those who would be us have us be merely robotic, manipulated tools of our head and flesh. So our head and our flesh and our cultures that empower and elevate our head and our flesh above soul have cleverly figured out how to use Jesus as a drug, as a palliative, to provide the relief of bringing our souls from death, or keeping them from complete death, for the both animation and submission that can bring, but not so alive that it can take charge and bring us fully to life. So we use it to keep us in a sort of a drugged state, an easily manipulated, self-serving, head and flesh-serving state. It feels better, apparently, than the soul being totally dead, and it is tolerable by our head and flesh because they still remain fully in charge. And we thereby totally sabotage what Jesus intended. He did not intend to raise us from the dead to serve ourselves, because the soul doesn't do that. He intended to bring our souls fully alive, which makes us every breath servants of the least of these among us, as was he being the perfect example of the alive soul, encouraging us to fashion of our soul one that is like his.